Sony have screwed up with Spider-Man so bad that they actually accepted help from Marvel and gave them full creative control for yet another reboot of the character. Now, I am going to do a versus video for Spider-Man Homecoming very soon, so I'm not going to mention everything in this review. Also, my final opinions can change when I get to the final versus video, but these are my thoughts after having just come out of the movie. So let's start with the good stuff of Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, the first great thing is that this movie skips the whole spider-biting, advice-giving, Uncle Ben dying origin story and skips to Peter already having his powers. And this is a breath of fresh air. We have seen this origin story done incredibly well in the first Spider-Man, and we saw it turn to shit in the second one. Seeing another adaptation of it would have been so pathetic and emotionally contrived that the movie would have died off faster than Superman. So breaking the story loop here with this reboot is ballsy and deserves to be commended. It was also cool to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man screw up with his powers. The other Spider-Man films never really spent much time on this, so it's nice and refreshing to see him practice and work through them this time round. Also, the action scenes were good. They weren't great, but they were good. But what this movie fully understands is Spider-Man's strength. Whenever he punches or even throws people, they go flying across the room. And during all this, the film even makes sure to showcase the limitations of Spider-Man's webbing. I mean, you even see him constantly refilling his web shooters throughout the movie. So this is some really good and new stuff that we haven't seen in the previous Spider-Man films. And surprisingly for a Marvel movie, the villain. Marvel have actually created their first legitimately good bad guy. Michael Keaton, also known as Batman, plays the Vulture, and he was actually very relatable, and I would almost go as far as to say that he shouldn't be called a bad guy. Almost. I do wish the movie went deeper into his character though, but they showcase enough to where I was satisfied. Also, this movie is pretty devoid of tension, which I will talk about later, but there is one scene where Vulture is talking to Peter, and it is an intense conversation, and Michael Keaton really elevates this material, which would be pretty flat in the hands of a different actor. And although I am still not a fan of his gas mask, it wasn't as bad when you see it in the film, and thankfully we don't see him wearing it that much. Alright, now it's time to talk about the bad stuff. Oh man, you guys are going to hate me after this. Well, to kick things off, the first half of this movie is slow. We primarily see Peter hanging around in school, and I was surprised to find out that I was not in the slightest invested. Now, don't get me wrong, watching Peter's school life should be interesting and is something I wanted to see. And in parts, it succeeds. But the movie focuses on it for way too long, nothing really engaging happens, and it feels like it's on par with the quality of those really old live-action Nickelodeon shows. On top of that, it also feels like padding rather than necessary character development. The narrative really needed to be much tighter because as is, it has so many scenes that I never want to sit through again. Now the second half was a much better movie, but man, that first half really exhausted me with the amount of flaws it had. Now it was also great to see that Stark had integrated so much different abilities into the Spider-Man suit, but there is a problem with this too. I personally thought that the suit had way too much going on. It was crammed to the rim with so much features that it felt more like the suit was special and Peter wasn't. And then Tony has the nerve to tell Peter this.
I'm gonna need the suit back.
But I'm nothing without this suit.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
Yeah, right. Tony, keep your fortune cookie mentor speech to yourself. The suit is clearly running the show here, and it kicks way too much ass. And unfortunately, that really does belittle Peter here, arguably too much. His suit feels like one big cheat code for future movies rather than something that complements him. On a more positive note, it was nice to see Spider-Man talking to the AI in his suit and getting along with it in a very similar manner to how Stark gets along with Jarvis. It was quite charming actually. But even that goes too far when the suit talks to him about love, almost as if it is infatuated with him, and it even tells him to kiss a girl at one point. So one of the major things this movie lacked is restraint. But that's another interesting thing. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't help but feel that Marvel were trying to attempt some raunchy comedy in here, and one of their attempts is that they get this girl to randomly point the finger at Peter, as if that's her way of acknowledging him. And the second joke was related to porn, and it was at this point that it was cemented to me that Marvel just don't know how to frickin' do jokes. And when you take into account that a major part of Spider-Man's identity is his wit and humor, then this is a big problem for the movie. Now there were a few good jokes, but the majority were pretty lame. Also, another significant problem is that I didn't really like Tom Holland's Spider-Man much in here. I don't want to say too much because I want to save it for the versus video, but there are times when he's very fun and charming to watch and listen to, but there are many other times where he's very obnoxious and loud. And this is odd because I much preferred him in Captain America Civil War. I had nothing but a big smile on my face every time he was on screen in that movie. He was written much less obnoxious and his characteristics were perfectly balanced, and he was also funny. I really thought he was handled perfectly in there. In here, it just felt like your typical obnoxious Marvel writers who were cramming in all their crappy jokes and lame expressive dialogue. They established what kind of kid he was in Civil War, and they really exaggerated it in this movie, and I honestly didn't think he was all that. On top of that, the actual movie itself is way too childish. In fact, this movie is practically a simple PG film. The only reason it got a PG-13 is because of the odd use of bad language. Now what do I mean by too childish? Well, simply put, there really were no stakes. No one really felt like they were in danger, no one felt like they were going to die, and everything resolved itself in a very clean and harmless way. Not to mention that everyone seems impervious to any kinds of bruises or injuries. Now in the second half of the movie, when Vulture threatens Peter, the tension suddenly manifested and it really started to build up. And that's when I got really invested and legitimately concerned. But then a few minutes after the scene was over, it dropped back down to a more child-friendly Marvel tone, and I lost interest again. And that's another thing, this movie felt like it was constantly on safe mode. I get that Spider-Man has gone through failures in Sony's hands in the recent years, but still, Marvel should not have played it this safe. This whole movie felt way too familiar, and honestly, if this is what they're going for, then I feel like I am too old for this type of Spider-Man. I don't think it should go all dark like some other comic book movies out there, but it needs to strike the correct balance. And unfortunately, this movie really lacks that. Now I have other problems too, but these are the major ones. And honestly, I am really tiring of these Marvel movies. When the credits to their movies hit, you feel like you have watched the same film, even down to the practically identical music that plays. So for now, even though I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, my final score for Spider-Man Homecoming is a 5 out of 10. I was really disappointed. Spider-Man is one of my favorite comic book characters, and this movie felt so standard, and what else? Oh yeah, safe. Anyway, sound off below with your thoughts on this movie. I do realize that I am in the minority, but that's not going to stop me from giving my honest opinions. So, stay tuned for my Spider-Man Homecoming versus video, and this one is going to be special, because this will be my first 3-way versus video. So, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you then. Take care.